Good morning, everyone. I would like to call the meeting to order. Please ensure you are on the P&W meeting on eScribe for voting and requests to speak. I will now ask the regional clerk, Will Short, to conduct the roll call.
Thank you, Chair James. Chair Redmond.
Present.
Councillor Craig. Present. Councillor Deutschmann. Here. Councillor Herb.
Present.
Councillor Foxton.
Present.
Councillor Harris.
Present.
Councillor Hunink.
Present.
Chair James.
Present.
Councillor Liggett. Councillor McCabe.
Present.
Councillor Nowak. Present. Councillor Solonen.
Present.
Councillor Shantz.
Present.
Councillor Verbanovic.
Present.
Councillor Williams. And Councillor Wolf.
Present.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I would like to acknowledge that the land in which we gather and reside virtually and in person today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Neutral people. We acknowledge the enduring presence of the Indigenous communities in this region, people whom we share this land with today, their achievements, and their contributions to our community. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Okay, seeing none, there are no presentations. We do have a delegation. So for anybody, are they in person or remote? You're in person? Okay. So we did have one other delegation who has canceled. So we will now proceed with Michael. I would like to remind you, all delegations, there are some guidelines for those who are joining us in person. Please make sure to press the button on the base of the microphone. If the light is green, the microphone is on. You will have 5 minutes. If you conduct yourself in any of the following manners, it will result in immediate removal, interrupting councillors, staff, or delegations, derogatory statements about councillors, staff, or others, turning your camera on at inappropriate times, any hate speech or defamatory comments. And please do not take offense if there are no questions after your delegation. It is a time to learn, listen, reflect, and you can go ahead when you're ready, Michael.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of committee. I'm here this morning to speak against the proposal to start placing advertising wraps on Ion trains and to increase ad wraps on Grand River Transit buses. This government has spent literally decades planning around and implementing a rapid transit system that is designed to help attract growth to the core areas and to limit sprawl. The goal was to make transit a competitive and desirable way to get around so people leave their cars at home and get around in a way that is better for the environment and which can support more density. Allowing our now renowned light rail trains to become moving billboards undermines that effort and puts the region's goals in jeopardy. Do we want to elevate transit and make it more appealing? Or do we want to make it a clear step down from private motor vehicles? Because the first thing ad wraps on transit do is make it clear that the people who really matter aren't the ones riding it. It's especially jarring when they're used to advertise car dealerships. But we don't put ads on our schools, we don't put ads on police cars, and I don't think people would like to drive up somewhere with their own car covered in ads. Putting ad wraps on transit also diminishes the branding that makes GRT and Ion vehicles recognizable and present in the minds of prospective riders. The staff report doesn't acknowledge this, but they're not proposing to cover every single transit vehicle. There's an implicit recognition that this would be absurd. But if there's an obviously unacceptable cost to covering all the vehicles, there's a cost to covering some of them. That's just the perspective outside the windows, outside the vehicles. The experience inside a bus or train with windows covered with these ads is much worse to most people. It's darker, it's harder to enjoy the view outside, it's harder to see where you are, especially at night or in the rain. Some people find it nauseating. Do we want to make riding transit a good experience or a bad experience? The report presents the question as almost purely about revenue. Unfortunately, recent years' transit budgets don't break down revenue sources for transit, but for previous years and piecing data together, I understand fare revenue brings in about 25 to 30 times what advertising does. Impacting ridership through degrading the transit rider experience obviously impacts regional goals around growth management and climate change, but it also directly impacts fare revenue. Where's the analysis on ridership impacts? There's none in this report, which only focuses on the upside of ads. When the transit operating budget is nearly $200 million, $500,000 isn't enough extra revenue to make transit appreciably better or to seriously lower fares. but it's more than enough extra wrapped windows to make transit much less appealing. Please do not support this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, we will now move on to the consent agenda. If you wish to remove an item from the consent agenda, please indicate so now, as we will not take questions on the consent agenda items. And the consent agenda item will be dealt with in one motion. Does anybody wish to remove this item from the consent agenda? Seeing none. Okay. I do want to actually have Commissioner Regier just speak to this briefly. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair James. I'd be happy to make an introductory comment to the final report. Regional staff, this is regarding 63 Benjamin Street in the township of Wilmot. Regional staff are recommending that Council adopt the site-specific regional official plan amendment for this address. The amendment will permit the use of alternative individual wastewater treatment systems, specifically tertiary treatment, on 6 existing lots of record that cannot otherwise accommodate traditional septic systems. Staff are satisfied that the technical submission demonstrates that private drinking water supply sources will not be negatively impacted and that the application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms or does not conflict with the growth plan. The statutory public meeting was held on September 10th, 2023, with several members of the public out in support of the application. No major concerns were identified through the consultation process.
Thank you. Okay, I need a mover and a seconder for this, for the consent. Councillor Foxton, Councillor Wolf. We will now start the vote in e-scribe. Please use your yes or no.
I'm not getting the voting thing, so I'm in favor.
Okay, thank you. That is carried. We will now move on to the regular agenda. The first report is the changes to GRT advertising policies under strategic priority, climate-aligned growth. I'll call on Mathieu to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair James. So today, staff is bringing forward a report recommending changes to the region's advertising policy for Grand River Transit vehicles. The report contains 3 separate and independent recommendations. The first one is to modify the existing cap with respect to full bus wraps. So today, the existing policy allows for 5 buses to be fully wrapped at a maximum at any moment in time during the year. So this would, modifying this cap to allow for up to 10% of the fleet would account for fleet expansion and still setting limits on the volume of advertising and mitigating the impact on branding. The second recommendation is to acknowledge the opportunity for the region to leverage its bus assets to drive regional initiatives that can have some social or public value, such as days or periods of significance, as we've done for Pride Month or for Truth and Reconciliation. And the third recommendation is to allow for a full wrap of one ion train. So the objective of this package is to provide GRT with more flexibility to leverage the transit assets for regional messaging and generate additional revenue, acknowledge the budget pressures presented by Commissioner Dyer last week. And open for any questions.
Okay, I have a few councillors in the queue. Councillor Huniak.
Hi, thank you, Chair. When I read this report initially, I was very indifferent to whether we wrap trains and buses or not. However, I'm surprised by the community's vocalization that it would negatively impact their ridership and their experience. I think we need to recall the report that came to us in May around ridership being affected by whether or not the vehicles look cool. And I just want to echo the question of the delegation that was just here. If we're willing to increase the cap to 5%, then why not do the whole fleet? I wonder if we can further minimize the ridership experience and reduce negative impacts, but maintain any positive impacts by only advertising on the back of buses, for example, where the windows are less important. Are there related thoughts? Sorry, was my question clear there? I got a little winded.
So I can through the chair I can give some elements of response. So I think we're the advertising. Our advertising practice goes through an advertising professional who's Pattison, so we have a 10-year contract with them. So they have kind of a pre-set, and the market itself kind of has different types of products. So one of the products that maybe we can talk about is the possibility for bus wraps that only cover the rear window, for example, of the bus. So that's kind of an alternate to the full bus wrap. So there are ways to mitigate kind of the impacts of full bus wraps. But there's really a whole, I would say there's a whole range of advertising products and associated revenue streams. So there's inside advertising, there's just the billboards on the side, then there's the full bus wraps or the partial bus wraps. So we can, we're happy to look into how to better manage these different categories with the advertising company.
Excellent, thank you. I'm not sure about my colleagues, but I would be interested in those other less expansive options.
Thank you, Councillor Verbanovic.
Thank you very much. Couple questions. First of all, with respect to the wraps, I too was surprised by the community response. I mean, to be honest with you, I've seen these in municipalities all across in different locations in Canada, the U.S. and elsewhere in the world. And so, to be frank, some of them are quite innovative. But the community response has surprised me. Have we done much community consultation on this?
Through the chair, no, we did not specifically engage the community on this. We've done a lot of jurisdictional reviews, as you mentioned. Full bus wraps are available in Windsor, London, Hamilton, Burlington, TTC. So I mean, this is a very standard practice for transit operators. We have a very limited number of buses on which we do that, since most other fleets have much higher caps than the one that we have today, and even the one that's proposed in the report. So today it's really more of a comparison, and then working. We've received also the community feedback over the weekend since the report was published, and we're happy to continue to work with the community.
So just from a timing perspective, is there a reason that this needs to be dealt with today? I guess I'm wondering whether there might be an opportunity to refer this to the budget process so we can hear from residents, who have views one way or the other as part of the budget consultation process. But more importantly, look at it in the context of here's a revenue stream that right now we don't have, and potentially could help fund other community identified, strategic plan identified priorities, including our housing initiatives that we know we're going to need to invest more in. And so I think it may be beneficial to actually A, hear from people, but B, look at it in the context of trying to come up with an affordable budget that also invests in key areas. Is there a reason that this could not be referred to the budget process and the consultation that goes with that?
Through the chair, that's a really, I mean, the link with the budget is definitely critical for us because that's we need to build our revenue assumptions for the budget, and that would be part of it. The other element of timeliness for this report to come forward is that we've heard, with the campaign that the GRT has supported on Every Child Matters for Truth and Reconciliation, we've heard aspirations of the community to maintain that bus wrapped all year. And if that is the case, because today our cap is to 5 buses, that would be a net negative revenue for us immediately. So there's a bit of urgency on the decision whether or not we should maintain the Truth and Reconciliation wrap for the next year or stop it at the end of October, which was our initial plan.
But we could take those kinds of buses that we decide are a community priority from a messaging point of view and simply look at them outside of that quantity of 5, correct?
That's one of the objectives of the report, is that today that's not how it's defined. Today we just say 5 buses wrapped regardless of the objective, whether it's commercial or non-commercial. So today the policy is, if we read it carefully, I would say a more public-minded message is a substitute for a commercial wrap. So we would need to have to change the policy to do that. Yeah.
But to be clear, the staff wouldn't have a major concern with referring this to the budget process and getting community feedback on this?
Staff wouldn't, but we would need to have a decision on the lost revenue for the Truth and Reconciliation bus before the end of October.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chair, I will be sending you and the clerk a motion to refer this to the budget process and consultation, but also that things like the Truth and Reconciliation bus and or the one we do for Pride Month be considered outside of the normal limits.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Vanovic. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Chair. Some of my questions were already asked between my other colleagues. I just wanted to confirm, Commissioner, if we were to refer this to the budget process, does this give your staff time to do meaningful engagement with the community?
Well, through the chair, I think what I heard from Councillor Verbanovic is also to put that in context of the overall budget. So again, it's always a trade-off between advertising and $500,000 of revenue for next year. So it would be part of the overall budget consultation. So we can be explicit about it, and we're very happy to share this publicly today. But so I think it has to be in the overall budget package and not a standalone consultation, which would lose a bit of that connection to the revenue and the other initiatives that are being brought forward as part of the budget.
Great. And just one other follow-up question, if I may. Are there any standards across the province or elsewhere that are for accessibility and wrapping of buses? Again, I had a few of the residents point out that wrapped buses are more difficult to visually see. Is that something that we consider when we're wrapping?
So through the chair, I am aware of some standards with respect to how the wrap is displayed. So there's a perforation standard on how much is air and how much is opaque. But there are no standards in terms of overall identifiability or readability or legibility of the buses. But that's something we can work on with the community. And figure out some rules. Maybe there's need to define our own rules with respect to that on what's what acceptable, what's the best way forward to find that right balance between revenue and comfort and transparency from inside and outside the transit vehicles.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Chair Redmond.
Thank you, Chair James. I have a couple of questions, and I do appreciate this coming forward at this point in time. I have questions, so I hope you will indulge me. But on Part A, it says 10% of existing fleet. Do we have a number? And I recognize that as we acquire more trains and more buses, that will change. But we would go from 5 to how many?
So that would be equivalent to 27 buses.
And if I could be talking about ensuring bus wraps for awareness of social initiatives, that creates a lot of questions for me. I know in past council conversations and how we arrived at 5 bus wraps, it actually talked about advertising standards, and we defer to Pattison, and they adhere to Canadian standards, and I think that's really important. And I think that the Truth and Reconciliation bus wrap and the Pride bus wrap are very well received by the community. My question is, what process do we use to decide what issues end up as part of the wrap? Because to me, that could be, and actually probably some of those issues are somewhat contentious right now within the community, but I think they're definitely the right thing to do. So I guess I'm just wondering that. And C, for social initiatives, causes more questions than answers for me. I don't know what social initiatives are. And again, I don't know what those processes would be. And I don't think we need to kick a hornet's nest. So if you could clarify those things, that would be helpful.
Through the chair, yes, thank you for these comments. I know with the team, we've tried to figure out what's the best wording. We hesitated between kind of community-oriented messaging, but it doesn't convey that. I think what we were trying to convey, and there maybe we need to revise the wording of the recommendation, is really about initiatives driven by the region of Waterloo. So it was about covering things like days of significance, so today we have Pride Bus and Truth and Reconciliation, but there may be some other initiatives in the future that we'd like to highlight, and other initiatives that may be taken by the region. For example, one example we had in mind was possibly a road safety campaign where we could use some of the transit assets for a regional initiative. So not. So maybe this is not written in the it's not crystal clear in the recommendation as it is today. So maybe we can revise that and be clear that this is about. It's not about general social messaging or public messaging. It's really about putting forward initiatives that are driven and led by the region of Waterloo.
And if I could, Madam Chair, I really do appreciate that answer. I would like to see more detail coming back. And again, to the point that Councillor Bravanovich raised about social awareness, I think, and I don't know if this is an annual opportunity or how often this happens, if those recommendations specifically around initiatives that are led and supported by the region of Waterloo would come to this horseshoe, it would be an opportunity to provide public input and public awareness. And I think it really should it should be a staff recommendation, but it should be sort of sanctioned by council because we're the ones that get all the emails if it's poorly received.
Just through the chair, I think that, and the report, again, it's, the wording is kind of delicate in the report, but the idea was, and I think it's in the next step section of the report, was for staff to bring back, for example, at the end of each year, a proposal for all of these regionally led initiatives that would benefit from identification on buses in the next year. So that would be approved by council.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you. Sorry, my camera is not working today, so you'll just have to listen to me. So I just had a couple of questions. I know in advance I sent them to Mr. Getty, so I have a lot of the answers already, but I will ask a couple just so the public can understand as well. I know there's a concern about the revenue if we decided to not wrap Ion buses or the Ion Transit, and we just stuck with. So how many buses to be wrapped to cover the amount that would be lost by the one Ion vehicle?
So through the chair, let me get back to the numbers. So today the one Ion train would be expected to generate a revenue of approximately $200,000 per year. Whereas the increase of the cap from 5 to 27 would generate $300,000. So if you do kind of prorate, I would say it's kind of one Ion train and maybe 20 buses seems to be kind of the equivalent. All this is these are negotiated terms with our advertising partners, so we'd have to go through that, but that's kind of the order of magnitude.
Okay, and then so in theory, if we did more advertising on platforms and more on buses, that revenue could be generated and be the equivalent?
So
Like if the cap is even higher than 10%?
through the chair, so that would be correct for bus wraps. I think there's also thresholds on. There's an overall volume of advertising that's acceptable or not. So but yes, through, for example, the increase in the cap of buses would grow revenue by $300,000, which is more than what would be created by one ION. So if we push the cap even further, I expect that revenue would increase as well. Probably not proportionally, but there would be we could find a sweet spot to increase the revenue just by working on a higher cap for wrapped buses.
And would there be a possibility of only half wrapping the buses where they wouldn't cover as much window space? Like just the lower portion for the back?
So through the chair, so I would say that there is the full wrap product is a very specific advertising product. So that generates it's a separate stream of revenue from, I would say, the standard billboards that can be on the back or the sides of the bus. So if we did not want to do any full wraps, so there you have like side panels. So there's different options. It's unlikely though that these would produce a similar level of revenue as the full bus wraps, which are a specific product that are actually very interesting for, I would say, higher end marketing purposes.
Okay, yeah, I think that was honestly one of the most prominent things that people have said to me. It's just, it's hard to see when you're on the bus. And I do remember being on the bus and not being able to see as well, especially if you're a little unfamiliar with the community. So I think if maybe there was a way to, like you said, maybe the perforations could be bigger and it would be just more visible for customers, they would probably not mind having the wraps on the buses. I think the ION was the like contentious sticking point from what I've heard from the community. So I like the idea of the buses, more platforms, and keeping our revenues up, but I don't think that the ION wrap would be a good idea just from what the community is saying. So I think I'll have to think about my vote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Deutschman.
Thank you, Chair James. A few comments. First, I find the 10% increase to 27, I think it was the number, is a pretty rapid increase in the number of buses, which is significant. Would we consider putting advertising on water towers and bridges and other municipal infrastructure, which runs in the back of my mind, and obviously we don't want to do that. I'm concerned about rushing 1B, which is introducing awareness of social initiatives. I think that takes a lot more time to flesh out, and it doesn't have to be tied in with whether we're going to raise revenue on buses or not. We need time on that because, what social initiatives are we talking about? Are we talking about pro-choice and right to life? I mean, we're going to get into those sorts of arguments and discussions about those sorts of issues and making those sorts of choices. And I think that that's a very serious and requires a lot of time to come up with a program like that. I mean, you see municipalities that have issues about what sort of flag they're going to put up. So I have a concern about that. And with respect to the ION has provided the region of Waterloo with billions of dollars in development, billions. And we saw a recent report from Mr. Dyer that talked about how much development charges we've collected as a community and the massive increase we've seen over the past few years at a time when, in a lot of communities, housing starts are low. And the ION has done noble service for this community. And for me to think that we're going to put a wrap on this symbol of Waterloo Region ingenuity and success, I just can't support putting anything on an ION and leaving it as is. So that's my discussion about that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Erb.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions and a comment. The contract that we have with the advertising agency, do they have any, so it has an upper limit of the cost. Do they have any guidelines to say that we want to do total wraparounds, or we're prepared to do what council would authorize, that the windows wouldn't be covered, that they would only be on the back? Like, what kind of guidelines are there, the understanding with the agency?
So through the chair, I think there's the way the contract is built is you have different, I would say, more standard categories of advertising that are mentioned in that contract. But then beyond that, everything is, open to commercial negotiation. So having, talking about how we would find a hybrid between a full wrap and a partial wrap, that's more of a discussion with that would be a commercial conversation with them on what revenue they think they can achieve with something that is which would not necessarily be a standard advertising package.
Okay, and do we like any statistics from other municipalities of how many of the vehicles would be full wraps as opposed to partial wraps? What they would be?
So through the chair, it is highly variable from one operator to another, but it's not unusual that operators have between 20 and 40% of their fleet, which is available for bus wraps. Then again, the market also, that's the cap. Again, depending on what advertisers want to be present and how much they're willing to invest into it, that can vary, but it's not unusual for most operators in the greater Golden Horseshoe have caps that are significantly higher than ours today, and then the one that's put in the staff report.
And I do want to commend staff for this report. We're always looking for new ways of generating revenue and subsidize our transportation system. And so thank you for doing that. We may not all agree on what the recommendations are. For me personally, the ION is just a very, very significant brand for Waterloo region. And I think many municipalities envy the fact that we have it here. And I think by putting any kind of advertising on it, we diminish that brand. And I would rather see us be able to maintain the appearance of it as a sleek, a modern, environmentally friendly kind of a transportation mode, and in no way diminish the goodwill that it has created for our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Erb. Councillor Foxton.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. It's a good report, Matthew, but I have the same concerns as my colleagues. I understand, I would need to see the figures as well. How does this increase in revenue assist the public? I have concerns about anything being wrapped for a complete year on the goodwill of us due to selecting which issues. So again, Councillor Doisman's comments about the social issues and that, and we need to discuss that further. So a good report, maybe a little bit premature, and I'm sorry to say that. So I think we would have to deal with the RAP one in regards to the Indigenous issue today, because you have to know by the end of October. But the rest, I think we need a more fulsome report. I sort of agreed with Councillor Erb about not labeling the ION, because it is a recognized representation of Waterloo region. But I really like the juice one. Maybe it's because it was bright and yellow and the dark days of winter are coming. So, yeah, I think this has to be fielded out a lot more and also brought to budget. We have to know what wiggle room we have, like 27 too many, what can we go down to, what will help balance the budget, assist the public taxpayers, but also meet the needs of what we want our community to look like. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Foxton. Councillor Shantz.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions and maybe a comment. So I'm seeing maybe a comment and then a question. I'm seeing two pieces to this. One is how much do we advertise on our fleet, and the other is and maybe this question is actually for Mr. Dyer. Do we have a budget for social messaging in general? Because I see them as two separate pieces. So it costs us, for example, to do the Indigenous bus. That's not part of our advertising piece. It may be the same company that's doing the wrap, but it seems to be a different issue. So do we have any kind of budget for social advertising in general?
Through the chair, I would say that any cost that we would incur for such advertising would be accommodated within the overall transit operating budget. I can't recall if there's a specific line, but we would certainly have some capacity in that budget to deal with those costs.
But it would be in the transit budget. I'm thinking, do we do any other social advertising in any other place, in any other way, or is this the only place that we're doing it?
That's a very good question that I'm hoping one of my colleagues could help answer, because I'm not sure I know the answer to that.
Thanks. Through the chair, we do not have a specific budget line for these types of initiatives. The bus wrap for Truth and Reconciliation was actually funded by the wrap. So the funding for that wrap was provided by all local municipalities as part of the Reconciliation Action Plan Working Group.
So I guess in my mind right now, I'm thinking if we're going to do wraps for social messaging or for regional messaging, we should find someplace else to fund that from, whatever that cost is. And the advertising on our fleet is a separate issue, and I think we need to deal with that in budget. In terms of the ION versus the buses, one of the things when we talked initially about the advertising was that the buses would move routes, and so the advertising would change the areas, the cities that they were in, whereas the ION is very specific. And so I think I agree with my colleagues that have said to leave the ION alone, but I would be willing to consider maybe more buses.
Thank you, Councillor Shantz. Councillor Deutschmann?
Yeah, thank you, Chair James. Just one question. Were the users of transit consulted with respect to this? Did we do a survey to inquire as to their views on their experience? Because we see a lot of comments about wraps on the windows, et cetera. And I'm presuming many of those are users, but I was just curious whether we actually specifically spoke to the users of transit to get their views on their experience and their thoughts about increasing the wraps.
Through the chair, so I mean, we're in conversation with users all the time. The amount of public feedback we get on Grand River Transit is significant. We get thousands of interactions with customers all the time. So we're still setting up more of a residents panel. I know that's something that you had asked for at a previous committee. So with a team, we've been looking at how to shape up that residents, kind of a permanent body for regular consultation that would enable us to deal with some of these quick questions. So we did not do a specific survey on this in the last 3 weeks. I think and then if we surveyed separately on, do you want are you interested in $500,000 more revenue for the region and transit? Then people would say yes, for sure. And then and if we talked about the advertising separately, then people are generally there's kind of mixed feelings from the community that we've seen on social media. So I think it's how do we put this in context? So I think we're still working towards that resident panel that will help us to have that continuous interaction with representatives of our user community. But we haven't done a specific survey in the last 3 weeks to discuss this specific issue.
Yeah, it just seems to me that on this particular issue that asking them about this significant change and how they feel about it so that we as councillors know, because social media is one source, but it would be nice to have a direct source asking users about this particular issue before we made a decision about expanding the program.
Thank you. I can see that, I think, around the horseshoe here, we have consensus about referring back. I'm going to go to Councillor Hunick, and then I'm going to have Councillor Verbanovic's motion put up for us to review. Councillor
James, thank you. I just wanted to say that I really appreciate Councillor Shantz's thoughts around having a different budget for social issues than advertising. I think it's brilliant. If it was a motion, I would second it. I think that the community in general may be more in favor of supporting social causes rolling around our community as opposed to ads rolling around our community, because we're already so inundated with advertisements. Anyway, so thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so we are going to have the motion put up for everyone to see. I will read it off. Okay, the motion, oh, it's disappeared off my screen. Okay. Okay. Okay, so the motion is first that TSD-TRS-23-010, changes to GRT advertising policies, be referred for consideration on 2024 final regional budget day. Second, that consultation on this issue be included as part of the 2024 budget consultations in the context of overall budget priorities. And finally, third, that any regional sponsored community-wide bus wraps not be included in the limit for bus wraps. Okay. So we've got Councillor Bravanovic has moved that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Foxton. Oh, okay. Okay, so
I actually have a question, but I'm having trouble getting my button on here.
okay. Okay, go ahead, Councillor.
So I'm just wondering if there's any possibility that this can come back sooner than budget day, so we don't get into some kind of a big policy debate at the last minute and not make a good decision.
Absolutely. I was just going to suggest that it come back during the budget process as opposed to the final budget day. There's a queue. Okay, all right. I can see the queue again. Councillor Shantz and then Councillor McCabe.
Yeah, thank you. Just a question on number 3. So regionally sponsored community-wide bus wraps, who decides on those? Does that come to council, or is there some other way to make those decisions?
And I will say before you go ahead, Matthew, that was one of my concerns, was just the process for this, given what Chair Redmond had said earlier, in terms of what goes on and how that has to be very clearly defined and parameters set. Matthew, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, thank you. So what we'll do is when we bring this report back to council, we'll be much more explicit on, because that was only mentioned in next steps as the fact that I would say the bus wrap, the regional bus wrap program would go back to council for next year, but we'll write that much more explicitly in the report back.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Councillor McCabe.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Just with respect to the motion, what I think is a friendly amendment, a couple of things that we should be more explicit about the need for this, if there is going to be advertising, that we take into account the accessibility issues that has been discussed. Because I think that, not covering windows, I think that's really important. And then the other piece was just picking up on Councillor Shantz's point about you just mentioned the process and taking that part out of the transit budget piece, which is, I think, what Councillor Shantz was saying, that point 3 should be not in the transit, in the transportation budget. So I think we should be explicit about that in the motion as well.
Okay, so just for clarification, Councillor Foxton, for others, there's the accessibility piece and coming back to see how that fits in terms of the wraps and ensuring that their accessibility needs considered, and then the process. Okay.
Well, in the budget, it shouldn't, the part of what I believe Councillor Shantz was saying was that the community wraps, that piece should not be in the transportation budget. That should come out of, like Connie mentioned, it came out of a joint municipality, but a process that was with other municipalities. So we should look at where that money comes from, but not the transportation budget, if I was interpreting what you said correctly.
Okay. And Matthew, just for you, and I guess staff, maybe this is Connie as well, just incorporating that when you report back as well. Okay. You need to update that. Councillor Banovic.
Well, thanks very much, and thanks everyone for the comments. I noticed the changes were made to the top paragraph, and I suppose I'm fine with it because it was my motion that was on the floor. So I'll consider it a friendly amendment. But I will say that we start the budget process very soon, and i.e. next week. And so I'm not looking for this to come back next week, because that really won't provide for adequate budget consultation. That's why I identified final budget day. I do get the concern around the policy piece of it. But the two are intrinsically linked. And so, I would hope that, when we look at that, it comes back towards the end, so that we have the overall budget picture to consider, and staff can determine when that would best occur, but also giving it enough time for budget consultation to take place.
Okay, Councilor Brevanovic, would it be okay if we put in specifics so that this be referred for consideration as part of the final, to report back, clerks, you can work with this a little bit, but that we have in there specifics around prior to final budget day?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. Councilor or Chair Redmond.
Thank you, Chair James. Just to the point that Councilor Vrbanovich just raised, it would seem to me that we have at least 2 public meetings where people who are engaged in this could come forward. So I think having it as part of the budget process provides some opportunity for public input. And I guess in the third bullet, I would suggest that could we identify a funding source for bus wraps? Because the Truth and Reconciliation example is very specific. I don't know that we do that for Pride. Maybe we do. Maybe that will be part of the process where the decision making is, does that group, are they all still willing to fund it? So I'm wondering if it's, again, a friendly amendment for the third one, if it just said not be included in the limit for bus wraps, and that a funding source and process be identified.
So that would be friendly, and really my intent there was, whatever process staff used to regionally sponsor the Pride bus and the one that we had for September 30th was really what I was getting at, not in the broader debate that I agree with you, Chair Redmond, I think is and others is a more complex conversation around what's included and what's not around social issues. And those are outside of, I think, what is the 2 examples, I guess, that we've had of regionally sponsored ones thus far.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you. Since most people seem to be in agreement with not wrapping the ion, would it be appropriate to add something like that in, where we're not looking at the ion, we're looking at buses, platforms, and other ways to generate revenue? Unless I'm totally misunderstanding everybody else's comments. Just because that way they could, in the report, focus on the other areas, if that's possible.
So, I don't know if you're looking to me as the mover of the motion, but what I would say is my intent is to hear from the public on all of it, because there are pluses and minuses to both of them, and I think we want to hear from the community and balance that with all of the other budget pressures.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was just kind of wondering what people were thinking on that aspect. But yeah, if it's going to come back with all of the alternatives and what people are thinking, then I think that would be appropriate then at that time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Liggett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like a bit more clarification. Connie had mentioned that it's not regionally paid for, as in large R, it's by the municipalities. I'd like some more clarification on that, because then we will need to know what the funding source is for social issues, because we may all differ on what social issues and how they're worded, that sort of thing. So does that all come back to the municipalities, or are we talking about a large R here?
Thank you, and through the chair. So I think what the purpose of this is there are times where we develop specific regional information campaigns where we're sharing information with the public, and a bus wrap is proposed as part of that campaign. Depending on which department or service this might be, it would be very different. So, for example, in the case of Truth and Reconciliation, this was identified as an initiative of all local municipalities. That wouldn't necessarily be the case if it were, as Mathieu said, a road safety campaign that would be developed as part of, the transportation team, and that would be budgeted for and paid for by that team. So I think, to be really clear, this wouldn't put additional financial costs on area municipalities unless they wanted to participate in an information campaign in which wrapping a bus was part of that.
So just for clarity, this would come back to the municipalities before they would offer funds to this then? Because it would be the small r here. That's what I'm after. Where, how do we direct the funding process for this so that the lower tier municipalities can say, no, we don't want to put our funds into this, or yes, we did. Aside from Indigenous and Pride, there's going to be a lot of different things come forward, and I just want to make sure that Cambridge, for instance, has a say in how our funds are going to be contributing to it.
Thank you. So I think that this is a large R. So these are Region of Waterloo municipally sponsored community-wide initiatives. And so an area municipality would not be participating unless they asked to participate.
Okay, Councillor Deutschman?
Yeah, just a question I want to put to Councillor Verbanovic. Given the nature of the motion and what's being asked, would it be friendly to say that we're putting 1A and C forward and excluding B for the budget discussion? And 1A is dealing with the wraps on the buses, and C is dealing with a wrap on the ION, and we save the social program discussion for a time when we have more time in the new year following budget to deal with this issue and give it a more, because we're not going to have time to have a detailed discussion about this issue, and just put that aside.
Okay, so I know that the time-sensitive pieces around the Truth and Reconciliation and that wrap, we might have to take that separately to address that today. And then in Councillor Verbanovic, I don't know if you want to respond to Councillor Deutschman, but I do see that potentially it is something that can be taken out to be dealt with after. But Councillor Verbanovic, I'll give you you can respond to Councillor Deutschman.
This is specifically on the third part?
On B, 1B, the social programs issue, taking that out. Yeah, I'm not sure how. What I would say is your first part changes, is deferring it or referring it to budget, and what I would say is we're specifically referring 1A and 1C and not dealing with 1B. So I'm not sure how we'll deal with the third part in your motion.
I guess my point is that what we're trying to do here is make sure that we can deal with the one that staff need direction on pertaining to the September 30th bus. They need that direction now.
And we could deal with that separately.
Okay, just for some clarification, Mathieu, do you want to clarify?
Just maybe to clarify the intention, maybe, and I know we've had internal conversations about what's the right way to identify it, but maybe we can narrow the scope down to regional information campaigns. I think that would cover the Pride and Truth and Reconciliation and things like a road safety campaign, but it would really narrow the scope very explicitly to the type of the type of messaging that we were thinking about.
That certainly is amenable to me. I mean, I just use regionally sponsored, thinking that meant the same thing as what you just said, so that's fine.
Okay, and Councillor Deutschman, and then we're going to try and move on for this.
I still find it a touch confusing. Why can't we just pass a separate motion saying that we're going to continue with the reconciliation bus wrap and deal with that separately if that's that's what's driving this. It seems to me that what I'm hearing is that's what's driving the consideration of 1B.
So I feel like there's two things happening. So there's that element, but then there's the broader context with regional initiatives. So Councillor Deutschman, if you'd want to put a motion forward for the Truth and Reconciliation specific, after we've gone through this motion, you can absolutely do that.
Right. Well, I'd like to move an amendment to the main motion, which is saying that we're moving 1A and 1C to the budget discussion, not 1B.
So right now, we're looking at the motion that Councillor Urbanovic has put forward.
Yeah, I'm moving an amendment to that motion.
Okay. Okay, all right. So we are going to take a 5-minute recess and just iron this all out and get clarification. Councillor Urbanovic, you okay with that? We're just going to try and understand exactly what's happening with this, the amendment to the amendments of the motion.
Sure, and Madam Chair, I guess the only thing I would ask for your consideration is that I do believe that a motion of deferral takes precedence, but I'll let you get guidance from the clerk on that.
All right, thank you. Okay, well, So we have an amended motion that's going to be presented to council.
Councillor
Just
James.
the amendment. Okay. All right.
Councillor James, may I make a comment?
Yes, I've got you in the queue. Just want to show this first one. Okay. I am going to read this amendment. Or Councillor Deutschmann, do you want to read this amendment? It's your... Okay, all right. Amendment that the regional municipality of Waterloo refer the report back to staff for changes discussed under TSD-TRS-23-010. Changes to GRT advertising policies for consideration prior to the final 2024 budget day on December 13th, 2023. And that Okay, and this is Councillor Deutschmann's amendment to Councillor Urbanovic's, and that consultation on this issue be included as part of the 2024 budget consultations in the context of overall budget priorities, and that any regional information campaigns not be included in the limit for bus wraps, and that a funding source and process be identified. And that the regional municipality of Waterloo continue the Truth and Reconciliation bus wrap until September 30th, 2024. Councillor Deutschmann, you're moving it. Do I have a seconder? Do we have a seconder for this? Councillor Liggett? Okay, so now I've got a few people in the queue. Councillor Foxton, I think you were first, and then Councillor Hunick.
I still would like discussion on the length of time for wraps, and I'll tell you why. I think that the longer a wrap is up, the less impact it has. Whereas taking it down and rotating maybe in the Pride one and then putting it back up again later has more impact. So at this time, I'd like to have a separate discussion on the wrap, the reconciliation one.
Okay, we can, when the report comes back, we can have absolutely that discussion around the length of time. I think that's...
But if we pass this motion, we're passing it for a year.
So you're specifically talking about truth and reconciliation. Yeah. Okay. All right, Councillor Hunick.
Thank you, Chair James. If it were up to me, the Truth and Reconciliation bus would remain for the entire year, as well as the LGBTQ bus remaining for a year. I understand that we are currently only voting on the Truth and Reconciliation bus for the sake of the time of year that we're at, but I fear and I feel for the LGBTQ plus community that if we approve this motion distinctly without approving the LGBTQ bus, that community may wonder why, especially because we've been coupling both issues through, sorry, they're not issues. We've been coupling both matters within our discussion of this concern.
Okay, thank you. Chair Redmond.
Thank you, Chair James. I guess I just do also have questions. I love the reception and the welcoming of the TRC bus, but I do wonder if it sets a precedent deciding that this particular one will be a year without any kind of context around why that decision was made. So I think I would respectfully ask, and again, I really do support the wrapping. I think it's wonderful. I think it does create awareness in the community, but I would ask that that portion of this, should it go forward, be taken separately.
Thank you. Councillor Urbanovic.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was in the queue.
Okay. Councillor Wolf.
Through you, Madam Chair. I agree with Councillor Foxton and Chair Redmond about the length of time for the Truth and Reconciliation bus. I do think it loses its impact if it's all year. I think it could be longer than October, perhaps, like maybe to the end of this year, to the end of 2023. And then in the spring, we have the Pride bus. I think that's all. I just definitely support the bus, and I think everyone was very pleased to see it. But I think things lose their impact when they're just always there. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. Just sort of in the line of Councillor Foxton and Councillor Wolf, the buses change the routes, so I don't feel like it's quite as much of an issue of being sort of in one place all the time and losing its impact the same way that it would if it was in one place. But I do agree that that's a discussion we can have at another time. And so if Commissioner Getzky, if you only need a couple of months leeway for the Truth and Reconciliation bus, and we can have that conversation in the context of a broader report, I'd be in favor of that.
Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I agree with some of the comments that have been echoed, that I think that the Truth and Reconciliation bus needs to be on a bigger talking point, especially I think we need to have staff look into how that relates to the calls to action and engage with our Indigenous community and see their thoughts and feelings on the matter. And just one comment to Councillor Hunick's point about the LGBTQ. Again, I think that we need to not be looking at these as one-off or as the only two potential social impact wrapping campaigns that we do. I think that there needs to be a system in place that we need to establish and be equitable to all organizations who might be seeking this.
Councillor Deutschman. Thank you, Councillor Sullivan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair James. Sorry. So my understanding on 1B was that there's this concern about the RAP not being able to continue. Fair enough. And I wanted to take it out as a separate item. So rather than a year, I mean, we can say put it to the end of February 2024, for example, and then that gives us time to have a greater conversation about all of this. I certainly, to anyone watching out there, I didn't want this to suddenly become a discussion about whether we support Indigenous initiatives or not, and I don't want to put us in a situation where we're voting for or against something that's related to truth and reconciliation. I mean, that's not at all the intent, and I know no one had that intent as well, and I don't want to stand up on a path that is misinterpreted that way. So I would amend that to say to the end of February. I don't know if it's a leap year or not. But anyway, to the end of February 2024, in order to give us an opportunity to discuss, it is a leap year, okay, in order to have a greater conversation about goals and intents and funding issues and everything else. So if everyone's fine with that, I'm going to change that to the end of February.
Okay, Councillor Verbanovic.
Thanks, Chair James. And just on that last part of the motion, I guess that's exactly what I was trying to avoid, is a debate on this issue. The whole process around both the Pride bus and the Truth and Reconciliation bus was successfully managed by staff without it having to come to council, without us having to deal with it. And really the only question in my mind is whether or not it's included in the 5 or it's not included in the 5. We're being put in a position where we either support a date or we don't support a date. And I think it's important for council to remember that the recommendation for the bus came from a working group, a broad working group that involves staff from all the municipalities, community Indigenous partners, and others. And so if it's going to be continued and how long it's going to be continued, I really think should come from the same group that made the original decision, and see it being handled that way instead of this becoming some kind of political hot potato.
Thank you. So I will have Councillor Deutschman speak, and then we're going to put up the motion, vote on that motion, and then vote on the report, the main motion. Councillor Deutschman.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say I agree with Councillor Urbanovic's comments, but I just want to point out staff was coming to us today for some direction on this particular RAP because there's a deadline currently under the policies. And that's how I understood it to be. So we're giving some direction on that issue alone. We're not getting into all of the nuances, although we may come February on this issue. But for now, the staff was coming to us today because there was a concern about how long the RAP could stay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and we'll put the amended motion up. We will vote on that.
Chair James, can you read it, please?
Absolutely. That the Regional Municipality of Waterloo refer the report back to staff for changes discussed under changes to GRT advertising policies for consideration prior to the final 2024 budget day on December 13th, 2023. And that consultation on this issue be included as part of the 2024 budget consultations in the context of overall budget priorities. And that any regional information campaigns not be included in the limit for bus wraps, and that a funding source and process be identified. And that the Regional Municipality of Waterloo continue the Truth and Reconciliation wrap until February 29th, 2024. Okay, and just for clarification, the amendments to this motion that are highlighted are Councillor Deutschman's amendments. So we have a mover, Councillor Deutschmann, seconder, Councillor Liggett.
Just a quick point of clarification, if I may.
Yes, go ahead, Councillor Sullivan.
So right now, this vote is on the highlighted wording, and then after we will get back to Councillor Verbanovic's amendment?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Councillor Liggett was the seconder for that. Okay, so we'll put the amendment up. Yeah.
Sorry, just to be clear, Chair James, that was just on the amendment, right?
Yes, and then we're going to pull up yours after.
Thank you.
Okay, so the amendment has carried. Now we're back to the main motion as amended by Councillor Verbanovic. Now, is there any other discussion around the main motion as amended?
Just if you could please read it before we vote.
Sure. Can you pull it up for me here? Okay, so the motion that the Regional Municipality of Waterloo refer the report back to staff for changes discussed under TSD-TRS-23-010, changes to GRT advertising policies for consideration prior to the final 2024 budget day on December 13th, 2023. And that consultation on this issue be included as part of the 2024 budget consultations in the context of overall budget priorities. And that any regional information campaigns not be included in the limit for bus wraps, and that a funding source and process be identified. And that the Regional Municipality of Waterloo continue the Truth and Reconciliation bus wrap until February 29th, 2024. So we have a mover. Is there a seconder for this?
Sorry, is that not exactly the same of what we just voted on?
Yes, it was. Councillor Foxton. Okay. So now you are voting in e-scribe. Okay. That is carried. Thank you, colleagues. Okay, what is the next one? Okay, so now we're moving on the agenda. 7.1.2, Downtown Kitchener Cycling Network, Duke Street from Frederick Street to Francis. I'll call on Colonel Musai, Manager of Transportation Planning, for the staff presentation.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Councillors. Thank you for having me for a very brief presentation on this project, Kitchener Downtown Cycling Network and Duke Street. And can I have the second slide? You see the map of downtown Kitchener here with the dark colors showing the city of Kitchener's downtown's AAA cycling network. The AAA means all ages and abilities, which practically means a separated cycling facility which should be comfortable for most of the population. And the focus of this report is on a short section of this network, and that is that little oval there on the top. Between Water Street and Frederick Street, it's a 100-meter section. And that is what is in front of you in the report. But there is also another section below that, which is the other oval there, a little bit yellowish. And that is the section between Frederick Street and Water Street. And I apologize, it should go a little bit further down there, that oval. I ended that a little bit short. That's Ontario Street and Frederick Street a little bit further down. And okay, we can go to the next slide. So that short section, that 100-meter section is here amplified, and you can see that kidney shape there. And that is that section which includes two parts. And the bottom part is what is in the region's right-of-way. That is the 100-meter section that we are talking about today. But the project that the City of Kitchener is building is the other section as well. That is a continuation from Francis Street to Victoria Street. And that is in the city's right-of-way, so we are not talking about that. I just want to show that this is really a connection between Water Street and Victoria Street, and there will be cycling facilities, separated cycling facilities in the future on Victoria Street, which is regional, in the regional right-of-way, and there will be a continuation under the railway tracks into the community. Next slide. This slide shows the section that has been taken out. Actually, we are suggesting to remove it at this time from the AAA cycling network, and that is the connection between Water Street and Frederick Street. And that, again, I mean, that should go a little bit further down. And the reason for removing that at this time from the AAA network is that we could not find a technical solution to accommodate two-directional bus transit service and the two-directional cycling facility on that section because of the very narrow right-of-way. Next slide. Having good transit service and active transportation connectivity in the downtown is very important. Both are the future for the downtown of Cambridge. And it's a very difficult compromise that we have to make here. The bus service that is there today is very important for transit passengers because it provides the best and shortest access to most transit passengers for both directions of travel. It is an effective and easy to understand the connectivity between the LRT and the bus transit service. And also when the LRT is down, then there is a two-directional bus substitute service that is providing the transit service and connectivity to downtown. We looked at a number of alternatives, and those included diverting buses from this section of Duke Street. And here I just summarized very briefly what are these benefits of doing that. It would have an impact on ridership. We would have lower transit ridership, and there will be much poorer accessibility to downtown, and the access would be much more complex. Operating costs would be higher depending on the number of buses that would have to be diverted. The operating costs could be going from $112,000 to $300,000 a year. And depending on, again, on the number of buses that we would need for the additional length of route would for every bus is $750,000. So there is a long and short-term impact on both operating and capital costs and on ridership by diverting buses from the current routing. Next slide, please. And conclusions. We did ask the public about the various alternatives for cycling. And the public clearly supports the AAA facilities on Water Street and Victoria Street, or between Water Street and Victoria Street, but they had concerns with not having AAA facilities. And we did look at 11 alternatives, and with sub-alternatives, 17 sub-alternatives. And the public expressed their concern that the other alternatives, which are not separated cycling facilities, are not good enough, and they were not supportive of that. And we have discussed, we worked together with the City of Kitchener through this project, and the City of Kitchener staff supports the conclusions of this report. Next steps. The design is ongoing for that section north of Water Street to Victoria Street, and the city is planning to build it in 2024. And we are continuing to explore alternatives for the section that we are not recommending to include in the AAA facility today. Thank you.
Thank you, Cornell. Any questions from council? Okay. Oh, all right. Councillor Shantz.
Sorry, didn't get my button clicked in time. Thank you for the presentation. Something that I'm not clear about with cycling lanes is, and maybe it's in here and maybe I read the report too quickly, but so AAA cycling lanes, are they the same? Do they look the same? Are they the same everywhere? Or does it just refer to sort of a certain quality?
It refers to certain quality, and the quality is basically separating it from vehicles. So it could be the sections that have been built recently in the city of Kitchener, downtown. Those are AAA facilities. Multi-use trails could be regarded as AAA facilities, or the facility along King Street that was recently built is also a AAA facility, which is a raised cycle track and a sidewalk beside it. Okay. The important thing is that they are separated from the fast-moving traffic.
Okay, thank you. One thing for me with cycling lanes, because there's so many of them, and even the separated ones, I think we need some consistency throughout the region as to how they are. Excuse me, how they are set up, because as a driver, and maybe not so much as a cyclist, but as a driver, when I come across different lanes that are managed differently and that have different kinds of cycling traffic in them, I find it difficult, and I notice other drivers too that are I'm concerned about the danger if they're different. So I think consistency is maybe more important.
Okay. Mathieu, do you want to respond?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I think that's also, I mean, we've known throughout the years, we've tried different approaches to bike lanes, and that's true that there's a whole range, separated, not separated, on the curb or not. I think our objective also, now that we've learned a lot from how effective they are, both from for every road user, for drivers and for cyclists, that's the objective of the corridor guidelines that the staff is working on this year. So that will help give kind of a strong direction on anything, and any new ones, and what we would aspire to in anything that's newly built. Now, we know that retrofitting all the existing ones is going to be that will come as roads and cycling lanes get rehabilitated. But I agree. I think we're trying to get to. I think we're at a stage where we're mature enough that we have a good understanding of what's the best standard that is both readable from drivers and understandable both for cyclists and pedestrians alike, and other vulnerable users, and that's what will be in the corridor guidelines.
So, thank you. And in particular to this project, because it's just a small section, and if we're looking at doing the rest of Duke Street, that whatever we do in this small section is going to fit with what the future plans are for the rest of Duke Street.
Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Because yesterday was a holiday, I didn't have a chance to phone staff and ask this question, but the section from Water to Frederick, which is not part of the recommendation now, is where St. John's Anglican Church is located, and we had a lot of feedback from that congregation and also community people who use that congregation. So I'm assuming they're aware of this decision not to do anything there, and if something's going to happen, they'll be part of that conversation.
We haven't get back to the church yet on that because they are not doing anything on that section of the church, of the frontage of the church at this time. But I mean, we will let them know that nothing is happening. We have been discussing the possibility of providing a cycling facility in front of the church, because that was a big issue, the parking in front of the church. But there are a number of reasons that was not the main, and actually we have resolved that problem with the church. And that was, we found a solution that they had the parking and we could have provided some sort of separated cycling facility there. But there were a number of reasons, as I mentioned, in terms of transit, that could not be resolved.
So by the front of the church, you're referring to Duke and not Water?
Yes, on Duke Street. Yes, yeah. I'm referring to Duke Street.
Okay. Yeah, I just hope we can keep them in the loop.
Yes.
Thank you. Just to follow up, that is my congregation, so I would absolutely hope that there'd be communication around that as well. The minister there does use an assisted device, so it would pose a very big barrier. So thank you for clarifying that. Councillor Urbanovic.
Sorry. Was having trouble clicking in. Thanks, Chair James, and thanks to staff for the update. I have had an opportunity to discuss this with our City of Kitchener staff as well. I mean, I'd be less than honest if I said I'm disappointed that we can't connect this stretch, but I also understand why we can't connect this stretch in light of the challenges and the operational considerations. And you know, as we look at trying to balance the need for roadway, cycling, and transit, this is a key transit route, and we want to make sure in both directions, and we want to make sure that it continues to function that way. I guess my question to staff, and something that's not reflected in the motion, is that the last slide in the report indicated that the plan or the intent would be that regional staff will continue looking at this with Kitchener staff and seeing if there may be, you know, opportunities in the future to revisit this. And I guess I'm cognizant that, you know, at various points in time there's development happening along Duke Street, and I just want to make sure that we're ensuring that we protect the possibility of other alternatives, but B, instead of just sort of leaving it as an open-ended comment, I'm wondering if we can, you know, put something in, and maybe I'd look to staff for some advice, that we see this come back, you know, for further discussion in some sort of reasonable period of time, you know, so that we just don't kind of forget about it, which, you know, councils change and so on, and that may end up being the case. Whereas if we say, okay, let's get it back within, I don't know, 3 years, 4 years from now, at least we know that there'll be a point in time where there'll be a check-in. The answer may still be the same, but at least we don't forget about it. And so I'm wondering if staff can comment on that and what that appropriate time would be to include in the motion potentially.
We will be doing the integrated master plan, and the active transportation master plan will be, or network will be part of that. And that is the opportunity to discuss it. And I mean, I'm expecting that it would be discussed because I mean that is an important connectivity.
And sorry, can you remind me what the timing of that is, please?
So through the chair, so the timing of that is likely to come back in early 2025, but I think that's the right scale of analysis, because that really, we really need to look at it as the network scale, and so it's Duke and King and Weber, and so it's really, I think that's the right place to do it. So maybe we can say in 2025.
Okay, so specifically, you're saying it's the integrated traffic master plan, so that we're not sort of binding you to time frame on that, because we know things can move. Madam Chair, at the appropriate time, I'd be pleased to move the motion, but simply add that the issue of the stretch from Frederick to Water, I guess, be revisited as part of the integrated traffic master plan and report back at that time.
Okay, so that's okay. We will have that noted. We'll add that to the tracking. I don't believe we need to amend any motion for this. So we will add this to the tracking list to report back.
Sorry, Madam Chair, if we could actually include that in the motion, I think that would be important to our community, so that it's actually there as something coming back, specifically.
Okay, so where would you like to add this in?
So simply add it as a second part to the recommendation.
Okay, we have that. We'll put that up momentarily. And then,
thank you very much, Chair James.
Councillor Hunick, I have you, and then we're going to vote on. We're going to.
Thank you.
Do I need to get a second?
Thank you,
hold on one second, Councillor Hunick. I just need Councillor Verbanovic. You moved it. I need a seconder for this. Councillor Foxton, okay. Councillor Hunick, you can go ahead, and then we'll come back to the motion.
Councillor Bravanovic's questions, comments, and potential motion were a great lead up to my question. When I read this report, it seemed like there was something tentative or temporary about this project. And so if we approve this project today, do we know the potential lifespan? Like, is it only going to last until 2025, and then we're going to revise it again? And if so, like, are we losing money on that temporary nature?
Through the chair, so in the other proposal is not a temporary. It's not a temporary lane. It's really to do a full permanent two-way cycle tracks between Francis Street and Water Street. The tentative part is more about what Cornell tried to talk about between Water and Frederick, where there we weren't able to find the right balance between different uses, and that's more that function, as well as the broader pedestrian and cycling network in the downtown that will be reviewed as part of the integrated mobility plan. Does that help?
Okay, so we will display the motion. I will read the motion and the piece that has been added by Councillor Verbanovic, and then we will vote. So you have a question? Okay, Matthew, go ahead.
Just a small comment. We call it the integrated mobility plan. So if you can just, thank you. And no masters.
Okay, that the Regional Municipality of Waterloo approve the recommended design by physically separated two-way cycle tracks along the west side of Duke Street, Regional Road 63, between Francis Street and Water Street, built by the City of Kitchener as described in report TSD-TRP-23-012, dated October 10th, 2023. And that the stretch from Frederick to Water Street be revisited as part of the integrated mobility plan, and that staff report back to the Planning and Works Committee at that time.
Madam Chair, sorry, can we just change stretch to section? It's probably a little more technically accurate.
Absolutely. Okay. So we have a mover, Councillor Verbanovic, a seconder, Councillor Foxton. You will now be prompted on e-scribe. Councillor Salonen, are you still there to vote?
I am, but it hasn't come up on my e-scribe, but I'm in favor.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so that is carried. Thank you, colleagues. We are now moving on to item 8, information correspondence. Just want to confirm that we have received additional correspondence regarding the GRT policy that was discussed earlier. Item 9, other business. Is there any other business? Seeing none, the next meeting is November 7th, 2023. We will now start. Oh, sorry, Councillor McCabe, go ahead.
I just wasn't clicking quick enough. I just had a question with respect to trails, bike lanes. I'm curious about how some of these, or if they are included in the Highway Traffic Act, because when Councillor Shantz was saying, I'm listening really closely to you today, Councillor Shantz. When Councillor Shantz was saying about some of the confusion, and that's something certainly, I mean, myself as a cyclist, I see, or, people walking, particularly kids trying to get back and forth on pedestrian crossings sometimes to school and places like that. It is really confusing, like who goes, who waits. And then I'm also just wondering about, like, what's in the Highway Traffic Act that stipulates that stipulates rules around that. And I'm also wondering if they actually are in the Highway Traffic Act to provide us some guidance on that. So you don't have to answer today, but just, okay, thanks.
Yeah, we can get back.
Okay, so Councillor McCabe, is it okay for staff to get back to you on that? There's just some, we need to look into some of those and give staff some time. Any other business? No? Okay, so we will now start. I need a mover to go into closed session. Councillor Erb, seconder. Councillor Harris will now be prompted on e-scribe. Yeah. Okay, that is carried. I will now need a mover and a seconder to adjourn Planning and Works. Councillor Shantz, Councillor Wolf, and they'll be prompted on e-scribe. Okay. Okay, that is carried. We will meet in or reconvene in closed.